My parents filed a revenge suit on my house. When I asked, Dad said, "It belongs to your sister," but I showed judgy, show proof. I won in court. They say blood is thicker than water. But what about when your own blood tries to drown you in court, just to steal the home you built with your own two hands? I remember holding those keys, the metal cool and solid in my palm, a testament to 5 years of relentless sacrifice. Then, in the blink of an eye, I was staring at legal documents with my name on them, not as the proud homeowner, but as if I was some kind of criminal. My new living room, still half unpacked, boxes everywhere, felt cold and sterile despite the fresh paint. When I finally cornered my father, David, and asked him why he was doing this, he didn't even flinch. He just looked me dead in the eye and said, "That house, that actually belongs to your sister, Lillian." That line, that should have been the moment everything shattered. But it wasn't. The real collapse, the point of no return for my family, came after. Most of my life, I truly believed the easiest way to keep peace in my family was to just be quiet, work hard, and never ask for anything I hadn't earned. Hi, I'm Clara. Growing up, I learned to navigate the minefield of my parents' expectations. My dad, David, made every decision sound like a royal decree, and my mom, Eleanor, somehow managed to make those decrees feel like personal shames. My younger sister, Lillian, she never knew those feelings. She just glided through life, buoyed by their unwavering acceptance, attention, and the constant belief that she just needed more support than I did. I figured out pretty young that fairness wasn't a principle upheld in our house. Expectations were. Still, I tried to play by the rules. My job became my entire world. Long evenings spent hunched over my laptop, hair pulled back, eyes burning. I'd constantly tell myself, if I'm more disciplined, I'll earn the freedom I never had growing up. I saved every penny for 5 years. No impulse buys, no fancy trips. Packed lunches, always. Every bonus check went straight into savings. With every promotion, I got one step closer to achieving something truly mine, a home, my home. The night I told my family I'd finally saved enough for a down payment, Eleanor clapped her hands with an almost manic enthusiasm. It was like she'd been waiting her whole life to hear that news. "Oh, sweetheart, we're so proud of you," she cooed, stringing lights around the dining table like it was Thanksgiving. David just gave a curt nod. Smart investment if you do it right. A fleeting, almost alien sense of pride warmed me. Then Lillian chimed in, stirring her iced tea, her voice devoid of any real humor. "Must be nice having that engineering salary. Some of us are still paying off grad school." I tried to force a smile. "You're doing well at your firm, Lil. You'll get there." She just went silent. Didn't have to respond. When my achievements drew attention she thought belonged to her, the air around her always grew thick, tight with unspoken resentment. But I kept pushing forward. After work, I'd drive through quiet neighborhoods, spending weekends looking at houses, imagining a life where no one could rewrite my judgments. I knew the little apartment I eventually found on the edge of the city wasn't a sprawling mansion. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and signing those papers felt monumental. This house, the one I'd earned, would become the catalyst that burned away every last misconception I had about my family. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. I was sitting on the floor of my new living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. I'd closed on the house just 2 days before. I kept ignoring it, screwdriver still clutched in my sweaty, exhausted hand. But the second Hannah's name flashed on my screen, followed by, "You need to see this right now." My stomach lurched. She emailed me a screenshot. It was Lillian's social media post. Overwrought, melodramatic, drenched in self-pity. 200 likes. "When your sister uses the money grandma meant for your first home and buys one for herself instead." The comments were a sea of strangers, calling me greedy, self-centered, fake. I couldn't swallow. I reread it slowly, desperately hoping I'd misread. No, she was fabricating a lie, claiming I'd taken money that, according to her, didn't even exist. Funds our family and certainly Grandma had never set aside for her. Finally, after another ring, I answered Hannah. "Dad." I managed to choke out. "Hello." David's voice was flat official. "Clara," he continued, "we need to talk about the house situation." "What situation?" Eleanor's voice piped up from the background. "You know what this is about, love." "No?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't." David let out a heavy sigh as if my very existence was an inconvenience. "Alana and I have spoken with an attorney. The funds designated for Lillian's future home were meant to go to her." My heart hammered so fiercely, I could feel it trembling in my wrists. "You knew that, didn't you?" "What are you talking about? There was never any designated money! I bought this house with my own savings! I can show you every deposit!" Silence. Then, David uttered the words that truly split my reality in two. "That house belongs to your sister." I sank onto the nearest step, my legs giving out. Dad, this is impossible. There's no agreement, no fund, I protested. No, you're just making things unnecessarily complicated, he retorted, his frustration evident. Your sister needs that house more than you do. She's been planning for it, and now you've taken it out from under her. She never told me she wanted this house. It doesn't matter, he said, unwavering. We'll be filing in court tomorrow. My hand was shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. Eleanor's voice, laced with incredulity and disappointment, cut in. Are you seriously going to take this to court? We just want to do right by your sister. She deserves this. You can buy another one. Another one, as if 5 years of sacrifice could be repeated as easily as picking up a carton of milk. No parting words were exchanged before the call ended. Just a deafening click. I was overcome with a betrayal I hadn't even imagined in my worst nightmares. Sitting there, in the dimly lit hallway of my new house, it hit me. My parents weren't confused. Their intent was crystal clear. They were choosing a side, and it wasn't mine. That evening, Hannah showed up with takeout and a look on her face that told me she already knew everything. You're not crazy, she said, her voice low and quiet. Ben walked in just behind her. They're trying to take your house away? I hadn't even realized he'd come too. He crossed his arms, his expression grim. Sleep was impossible that night. I just kept thinking, Clara, you need to prepare yourself. Your family is coming for you, and they're not bluffing. I sat at Hannah's kitchen counter the next morning, a cup of cold tea in my hand, the apartment buzzing around me. The shock hadn't worn off. It had transformed into something heavier, a tight constriction in my chest. Hannah sat across from me, elbows on the counter. You're not leaving this place, she stated, leaving no room for argument. I didn't argue. I couldn't. You shouldn't be alone in that house right now. Ben returned the next morning with a folder tucked under his arm. You're going to need a specialist, someone who handles property claims and inheritance disputes. He handed me the information. The best person I know for that is Sarah Miller. I just blinked at him. There's no inheritance dispute. I managed. He gave a humorless smile. Your parents are trying to create an inheritance dispute. The following afternoon, we met Sarah Miller in her office. Glass walls, soft lighting, everything meticulously organized, just like her. She sat in silence as I poured out everything: David's threat, Lillian's post. When I finished, she leaned back. Their claim sounds fabricated, but weak cases can still create damage if not handled properly. We'll need statements, payment records, anything showing your house was bought strictly from earned income. I have everything, I declared, my voice regaining some strength. Every transfer, every savings log. Sarah tapped her pen and nodded. After hours of feeling like I couldn't breathe, I was finally finding a rhythm. No, we need witness statements. Who knew the inheritance was equally divided? My Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark. I blurted out, a spark of hope. You need to contact them. Their statements are crucial, and fast. Ben chimed in. Uncle Mark answered on the second ring. Clara, my darling, I heard something was happening. He didn't hesitate when I explained. Your grandmother would be absolutely livid. I'll sign whatever you need. Aunt Carol's reaction was quieter, but far more impactful. I was always worried this might come to pass, she began. Your father, he asked your grandparents to change the will to give more to Lillian. They refused. He never accepted that. She paused. I'll testify if you need me. Slowly, the truth began to take shape. This wasn't some isolated event. This wasn't even really about me. It was the culmination of years of unspoken expectations, years of Lillian being promised things that would never be hers. Then, 2 nights later, the unthinkable happened. Hannah and I were on our way to my house to grab some more of my things, and we saw movement on the porch. Someone was shaking the doorknob. Lillian, she was trying to fit a key into the lock, a key I'd never given her. What are you doing? I yelled. She recoiled, gasping. I thought I could just look around. It's going to be my house anyway, she snapped, frustrated. That moment changed everything. Sarah referred to it simply as attempted unauthorized entry. Evidence. And suddenly, the fear I'd been battling transformed into something stable, something with a bite. If they wanted a legal fight, they were going to get one. A solitary one. The courtroom smelled of disinfectant and old paper, a stark, comfortless scent. Walking beside Sarah down the corridor, the walls seemed to vibrate with every beat of my heart. I was trembling, my breath shallow and uneven. I wasn't afraid of losing the house anymore. I was terrified of facing the people who raised me and seeing them as entirely different from the people in my memory. David, Eleanor, and Lillian were already seated at the plaintiff's table. David adjusted his stance the moment his eyes met mine, like he was preparing for a fight. Eleanor looked away, a mix of arrogance and growing animosity. Lillian stared me down head to toe. She clearly thought I was the one betraying her. Sarah gently touched my arm. Silence fell abruptly as Judge Emily Davies entered the chamber. "Maintain composure," she declared. "We are here for facts, not emotion." She had this way of making you sit up straight without even thinking about it, a confident, no-nonsense demeanor. "Let's begin. Michael Reed, my parents' lawyer, was up first. Your Honor, this case concerns a verbal family agreement regarding inheritance distribution, an agreement that Miss Clara violated when she purchased a property using funds intended for her sister Lillian." Verbal agreement. My stomach churned. He continued, "Why maintain that Lillian was the intended recipient of the house Miss Clara purchased, based on long-standing family discussions?" Sarah remained motionless, not reacting. She waited for him to settle into his seat, then rose herself, with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear. "The plaintiffs claim a verbal agreement that has no witnesses, no documentation, and no mention in the legally executed will of the deceased grandparents. Meanwhile, the defendant has provided detailed payment records confirming that every dollar used to purchase her home came from 5 years of earned income." Judge Davies nodded. Michael Reed called David to the witness stand first. My father rose, took a deep breath, and faced the courtroom, looking like a man finally given the stage he deserved. "My mother always wanted to help Lillian get her first home," he stated. I clenched my jaw. Clara knew this. Sarah placed a grounding hand on my arm. Michael Reed's second witness was Eleanor. She managed to make her voice tremble just enough to sound compassionate. "We have no intention of causing Clara any distress," she said softly. "What we want is the commitment that was given to Lillian." A promise, just another word, with no backbone. Lillian was called next. After a shaky inhale, she tried to smooth the creases in her skirt. "For years I've been saving," she began, "but I don't earn as much as Clara." I believed she knew the house was for me. Michael Reed placed a comforting hand on her shoulder as she stepped down. He did that. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood tall, her gaze piercing. "Your Honor, we call our first witness Uncle Mark." Uncle Mark entered with cool dignity, a man who didn't need to prove anything. He stood in the witness box and testified, clearly and expressively. Michael Reed tried to challenge him, but Uncle Mark wouldn't budge. "No special promises, no conditions. I was there when it was Reed." The will was divided evenly. Aunt Carol was next. She moved slowly, but her voice was unwavering. "Robert requested that our parents change the will to give Lillian more. They refused. They believed in fairness." Not a sound in the courtroom. Eleanor looked down, averted her gaze. David's jaw muscles clenched. Before I was called, Sarah spoke to Aunt Carol, considerate and appreciative. When I sat down, the microphone felt too loud, too close, but speaking my truth was like breathing oxygen. "I saved for 5 years," I stated. Sarah handed a neatly organized folder to the judge. "I can account for every single cent. Not a dollar from any inheritance was spent," Judge Davies confirmed. "These documents provide documentation of savings transfers, deposits, payroll, and income for a period of 5 years. She looked carefully through the pages. "I'm aware of that situation." Then Sarah dropped her bomb. "Your Honor, we have one more matter to address. 2 nights before mediation, Lillian attempted to gain entry to the defendant's property using a key that was not hers." Lillian abruptly lifted her head. Sarah ignored her. "I wasn't breaking in. I just wanted to take a look." A neighbor witnessed the attempt and reported it to the authorities. Sarah added, presenting the report. "The defendant did not pursue charges, but it demonstrates a belief held by the plaintiffs that they were entitled to the house regardless of legal ownership." Michael Reed stumbled. "That has nothing whatsoever to do with the matter at hand." "It is at the core of this case," Judge Davies said, raising her hand. Her gaze silenced the courtroom. "I have reviewed the material. The will was equal. There was no evidence of any financial arrangement assigning funds specifically to Lillian, and the defendant's purchase was made entirely from her own earnings." She paused, letting the air thicken. Lillian's face turned chalk white. "Regarding the attempted entry, that escalation is extremely troubling." "Then," Judge Davies declared, "I hereby dismiss the case in its entirety." She brought the gavel down with a forceful bang. Her voice didn't waver. "The plaintiffs are barred from refiling these claims." A burden I hadn't realized I'd carried for months lifted from my chest. It wasn't relief. It was the air being forcefully expelled from my body. Eleanor covered her mouth, speechless. In David's eyes, I saw a flicker of something malevolent: anger, perplexity, wounded pride. Lillian's eyes welled with tears. We had barely reached the corridor when David stormed after us. "Is this an back? We're still family!" he shot back. For the first time, I turned to face him directly. You don't sue your family members over lies. Family members don't try to steal what someone else worked hard for. You made this decision. Eleanor reached out, her fingers brushing my hand. I don't want to fight, she whispered. You already replied. Lillian let out a small sob. And you lost. That was supposed to be mine, she choked out. It was never yours, I said quietly. But you've never been interested in the truth. Only in what you thought you were owed. For the first time, she seemed unsure, almost vulnerable. Sarah stepped up beside me. Her voice was calm, unfazed. Absolutely. Leaving that building, I felt no triumph. Instead, there was a sense of calm, of fulfillment, of pure freedom. They hadn't expected my response, but somehow they understood it. That evening, walking home, I watched the sun dip below the rooftops, painting the street in a soft orange glow. It was the first time in months I saw my own front door and didn't feel my stomach clench. I opened it, stepped inside, and let the quietness wrap around me like a comforting blanket. No worry, no anxiety, no one trying to change what was rightfully mine. Hannah was the first to arrive, carrying takeout, a triumphant grin on her face. You did it, she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. Ben followed with a bottle of sparkling cider. Not many people walk into a courtroom against their entire family and walk out standing taller. Sarah came in last, as composed as ever, but her smile was more genuine than I'd ever seen. Uncle Mark called to say he and Aunt Carol were bursting with pride. Justice doesn't fix everything, Sarah murmured, but it gives you the space to breathe. Her words reminded me of my grandparents' unwavering belief in fairness. Tonight, I finally felt connected to that conviction. Not just because of blood, but because we chose to be together. I walked leisurely through my living room, touched the smooth surface of the table I'd just polished, and opened the windows to let in the cool night air. This house didn't feel like just a purchase anymore. It wasn't just an address. It felt like mine again. Completely. Absolutely. Standing there on the threshold of my home that night, I had a simple, immutable revelation. Family isn't just about blood or tradition. It's not about the people who claim to know what's best for you. It's about the ones who still stand by you when everything else falls apart. I won more than a case. I took back my life, my home, my boundaries, and my voice. If you've ever had to fight for what's yours or confront people who tried to rewrite your story, you are not alone. Let me know in the comments, how did you find the strength to stand your ground?